Washington, the Trump administration is still working at light speed on day 10. We will distill for you the most important things that happen every day and why they matter. Today, the president made a major announcement regarding immigration.
I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it.
No, as a matter of fact, most people do not know about it. And you heard that right. The president is now saying the Department of Defense will prepare 30,000 beds at Guantanamo Bay to house criminal illegal immigrants. Also tonight, President Trump signed two major executive orders. One revokes visas for students who join pro-Hamas marches on college campuses. The other creates a planning committee for the 250th anniversary of Independence Day. Plus, the president also signed the Laken Riley Act into law today. The legislation requires the Department of Homeland Security to detain illegal immigrants arrested for both violent and nonviolent crimes. So with that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. First tonight, 10 days into Trump 2.0, and Democrats cannot stop taking the bait. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. No, you can't put 30,000 people at Gitmo. It's not going to happen. But after 4 years of wide open borders, Gitmo for rapists and gangbangers here illegally doesn't sound all that bad, does it? Trump wants Democrats to fight him, and they are.
I don't want to hear that they're doing work that no one else will do. Talk to guys in the building trades, plumbers, contractors.
Picking strawberries. I mean, like,
these building trades guys are being hurt.
I can't
by
wait.
Labor that shouldn't be here.
I can't wait until American women can't get blueberries for their smoothies. I cannot wait until there is a full crackdown on all small businesses, as if that's going to be the solution to the immigration problem.
It's part of a different agenda they have, which is really to make America white again.
I think there's a very clear message as to what this president wants the look of a criminal migrant to look like, what an undocumented migrant. And I think that's racist.
That's all Trump needs. Deporting illegal immigrants who commit violent crimes is racist. Let's go to the other big story today. Trump doesn't really care about Robert F. Kennedy. Kennedy's hearing, I think reasonable people can agree, didn't go so well. But that's besides the point.
And all these Democrats are opposed to me for partisan issues. They used to be my friends. Agreed with me on all the environmental issues that I've been working on for my whole career. Now they're against me because anything that President Trump does, any decision he makes, has to be lampooned, derided, discredited, marginalized, vilified.
Fact check, true. And let's be fair about this. Kennedy has some pretty unusual views. I won't use any pejorative terms here, but there's 40% of what he says that's pretty far out there. That doesn't mean he's wrong on 60%. A lot of what he says is pretty smart. Think about things about nutrition, how we keep spending more money and having worse outcomes in healthcare. But that other 40% is concerning. Again, none of it really matters. For years, we've been forced to trust the experts, to follow the science. It's been rammed down our throats. Turns out the science was wrong. So now in a choice between the establishment and crazy, a lot of Americans will take a chance on crazy. And it makes Democrats argue that big pharma and big food are great, which they did today. Kennedy's confirmation hearing, mothers from across the country cheered him on as he faced members of Congress. They all want the establishment torn down. So reasonable people can agree the establishment isn't working for America. That is why Trump got elected. Defending the establishment is a fool's errand. And for some reason, Democrats keep taking the bait. They cannot give up the establishment. So yes, Team Trump handled the government funding memo terribly. It was a completely unforced error. Today, they had to pull back the Office of Management and Budget memo. It was their first screw up, the first time they got over their skis. Democrats celebrated the big win. The media laughed at Trump. Yet most taxpayers are happy that anyone, is just paying attention to their money. It's the common sense test. Begin tonight with Chris Cillizza, journalist, senior advisor of DGA Group, Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under George W. Bush. Gentlemen, Great to have both of you. Dupree, stand by 1 second. We're going to get the law on this. Start with Cillizza. I think it's fair to say 10 days in, Trump still has Democrats unsure where to go.
Yeah, in fact, it's interesting. The freezing of the federal loans, and grants, that's actually the first time I was like, oh, wait, the Democratic Party is still around. Yeah, I mean, it was actually the first time they sort of took a position, pushed, got in front of the media in a way that was on policy. It wasn't just like, oh, Donald Trump's a buffoon, right? It was on policy. And Trump rescinded it. To your point, unforced error. He botched it. I don't care what they say. The after action report we'll find out what exactly happened, but they botched it. What I would say though is, I do think, in a basketball game, if you come out and you press the other team really, really hard, I kind of feel like that's what Trump has done. The other team is almost always not ready for it, and they're back on their heels a little bit, right? And I feel like that's kind of where we are.
And look, masterclass today in the Laken Riley Act in terms of the stagecraft, the announcement. Donald Trump walks out, makes the announcement, brings up Laken Riley's mom, and there was not a dry eye in the place.
There's no amount of change that will ever bring back our precious Laken. Our hope moving forward is that her life saves lives. We're so thankful that her passion for helping others and her legacy for doing good in the name of Jesus Christ will carry on.
This was a young woman who was killed by an illegal immigrant who, if this act had been in place, would have been deported. Again, how do Democrats, or I should say, put it in the flip side, how long can Donald Trump keep up the common sense stuff?
We've talked about this. He is both his own best political advocate and his own worst political enemy. He gets in his way a lot. Now, he hasn't done a ton of it. Interestingly enough, it appears as though, compared to 8 years ago, and I'm old enough to remember that, 8 years ago, it felt like he and everyone around him were pretty surprised that they won, and they weren't totally sure what to do. The week leading up to the freeze on the grants thing, which they screwed up, was remarkably efficient. Now, we can debate whether it's good policy or not. Tom can debate about the law much better than I can. I've disappointed my mom for years by not being a lawyer. But I would say, from a political perspective...
The good thing that it's not held you back from offering your opinion.
And another thing about the Constitution. No, I would just say, I think he has executed efficiently, and it's not just him, the people around him. With this one exception, they have done a very good job of showing that they know how the government and the law works.
Where the levers are.
8 years ago, it was like, is there anyone who's ever worked in government before?
Tom, this is where I think what is most interesting is happening, because the Laken Riley Act is actually law. The law of the land has changed. Beyond that, on almost every one of these executive orders, Donald Trump is going to, if he is not already, be really challenged in the courts.
To say the least. I mean, look, the success or lack thereof of the Trump agenda is going to be determined in very large part by what happens in the courts over the next year. And what we have seen right now from the Trump in the early days is that they are pushing as hard as they can, as fast as they can, on every front they can until a court tells them to stop. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see some early defeats for the Trump administration in the lower courts, but many of these issues are ultimately going to percolate their way up to the United States Supreme Court, which may well come out very differently.
And the whole point, right, 6-3 is sort of the general consensus of how it's split, conservative versus liberal, or Republican appointees versus Democrat appointees. So many of these executive orders, though, they have teeth for what the government does. Study this, look at that, on and on and on. How much can he really do beyond what he has already done in executive orders?
Well, I think he can do a lot. I mean, for one thing, he can start proposing legislation. Right now he's got a Congress that's generally going to be supportive of his agenda. Legislation is far more permanent than executive orders. And also he can affect change through regulations, through his cabinet officials, all of whom are now proceeding through the confirmation process. They can issue orders to their agencies. They can issue regulations that will guide the government in that respect. So he has a lot of tools that he can bring to bear here. And I think we're going to see him use them as this administration goes forward. Executive orders are super fast solutions to things. That's why we see them. They were written up, to Chris's point, they were written up in advance. They were ready to be unrolled on Inauguration Day. That's why we're seeing this flurry at the beginning, but we're going to see the legislation and the regulation come in time.
Just one other thing about the pace. I think that Trump wants to not just move quickly and break stuff, which I think he does kind of want to do, but I also think there is a little bit of reaction to the slowness and pace of Biden, right? You're always in some way formed by what came right before you. And he ran as, this guy's too old, this guy doesn't know what's going on, this guy's slow, he only does things his staff tell him to. So I do think Trump wants to come out of the gate, not just because they've got a lot of stuff they want to do, but I think the pace is purposeful beyond just, we're going to knock out these executive orders. And to Tom's point, we're going to push until the law tells us, until a court tells us not to. I think it is also sort of a tonal thing. I am active. I'm 78, but I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. I'm over here. I traveled to North Carolina.
The media is not sort of used to it, right? In terms of how to deal with it. And Democrats certainly aren't used to playing defense. But George Will, one of yours and my mutual heroes, was on the show last night talking about the issue of as these things morph from the court of public opinion into the courts. Take a listen.
It was an act of stupendous short-sightedness on the part of progressives to say that trips that Clarence Thomas took were bad and the flags run up the flagpole by Mrs. Alito were terrible, all in an attempt to discredit and delegitimize the Supreme Court. Now they turn around and say the Supreme Court is all that's standing between us and Mr. Trump.
George Will, as always, is correct. I mean, look, the fact here is that the Democrats have spent the last few years doing everything they can to delegitimize the Supreme Court, tarnish the conservatives in the eyes of the public of the United States. And I think right now they are in a very difficult position when they are looking to the Supreme Court, the very justices whom they have denounced as corrupt, as their last best hope from protecting Americans from President Trump. It puts them in a difficult position. Look, I think at the end of the day, the Supreme Court is going to fairly apply the law and the Constitution regardless of the political attacks. But I do think it underscores the irony here that they have spent the last few years tarnishing the institution that they are now looking to rescue them.
All right, we're going to dig into RFK Jr. in the next block because I think the specific part of it really matters. That said, Tom, for Democrats to continue just to keep running to the courts over and over, doesn't that just reinforce the Donald Trump talking point? I'm fighting for citizens and the Democrats are fighting against Trump?
Well, so I want to echo the point you made in the open that I was listening to off camera because I think it's right, which is...
That's a first.
I know. I always hesitate to agree with you because I feel like it feeds something bad in the long run. But I do think you're right, which is the Gitmo thing, right? 30,000. It's not going to happen, right? It's the same thing of like, we're going to round up all 11 million people who are here illegally and we're going to send them back. It's very unlikely logistically they're going to find all those people and send them back. But every time Democrats go for the bait, go for the outrage, Elon Musk is doing the Hitler thing. He wants to buy Greenland. He's the Panama Canal. We're going to
sue
Gulf
to
of
close
America.
Right. It doesn't.
Like, you have to. Everything isn't a mountain. There have to be molehills. And I think Democrats from 2017 to 2021, everything was a mountain. That was the only way they thought, okay, we beat him, we vanquished him. Well, they didn't vanquish him.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Cillizza is going to take over the rest of the show and deliver. No.
I thought I was getting up to get in the anchor chair.
and deliver how I've been right. He will just continue to profoundly
stay tuned for my Leland is right segment at the end of the show.
It's good to see both of you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
You're always welcome back. All right, Robert F. Kennedy, as we said, got grilled by Senate Democrats, a grilling that will only make him stronger with the MAGA base, and maybe most importantly, with the president.
Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with
Are you
leadership.
supportive of these onesies?
Bill O'Reilly told us this week that if any of Trump's nominees go down, it would be Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In fact, O'Reilly predicted he would not get confirmed. The first day of Kennedy's confirmation hearings were pretty rough, and it should be. Fair to say, Kennedy's views often border on, well, you decide.
Did you say that COVID-19 was a genetically engineered bioweapon that targets black and white people but spared Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people? Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon? Did you say that exposure to pesticides causes children to become transgender? Did you write in your book, and it's undeniable, that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS?
He, of course, denied a lot of those and wanted to clarify, but that's not it. There's conspiracy theories about his father's assassination and the whole Wi-Fi crossing the blood-brain barrier to cause cancer. So yes, what Bobby Kennedy Jr. says is often a little bit out there. But as we have all learned, in the eyes of MAGA, resistance to a Trump pick only makes them stronger. The establishment doesn't understand that most people think that everyone in Washington are liars. That's because most people in Washington are liars. And when given a choice between liars and a little out there, a lot of Americans will take a chance on nuts.
I would ask, any of the Democrats who are chuckling just now, do you think all that money, the $900 billion that we're sending to Medicaid every year, has made Americans healthy?
Here's somebody from the left, somebody I don't agree with on many issues politically, coming together with President Trump.
I didn't know anybody with a food allergy growing up, peanut allergy. Why do 5 of my kids have allergies? Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s.
Dr. Richard Carmona joins us, former United States Surgeon General under George W. Bush. I think you'd agree that we've got a major health crisis in America, which is something that Bobby Kennedy Jr. says over and over and over again, but you don't think he's the right man for the job.
I have some concerns based on the competencies, the experience, and quite frankly, the background that would allow him to run one of the largest agencies in the federal government with over 62,000 employees, a $1.7 trillion budget that touches every American, and very often many people around the world are allies who rely on us as well. So this is not has anything to do with partisanship. If I look at him and he was applying for a similar job in a large corporation, I mean, he wouldn't get through the door. And a lot of it because of the misinformation and disinformation, which is not based on science. So
do you understand the anger in so much of America at Washington? And I say this respectfully, but there's the feeling that people with experience and people with the credentials and the people who have so long gotten these jobs failed us all. And fine, if he has a few unusual views, that's okay. Better to have somebody bring in a wrecking ball.
Well, first and foremost, I reject the thesis that it's failing. I think we can do a better job. There's no question. But the issue here is really about competence. And the fact of the matter is there's no track record which would suggest that he can run one of the largest agencies in the federal government, having had no experience doing so, no public health admin experience, no medical or public health credentials, repeatedly driving misinformation, which confuses and scares the public. Health policy positions are not supported by science. They're his opinions, which are distinctly different than scientifically backed ideas. So for all of those reasons, I have concern. That's not to say that we must do a better job in Washington and become more efficient and more effective. I would agree with that. But again, this is a person I see that has not demonstrated.
No, I get that, and I understand it. You say that you think we're doing a pretty good job. Obesity rates are doubling and tripling. Diabetes rates are going way up. What I think is most interesting is how the Democrats in the Senate, who I think held some of the same views you do, dealt with him today. Here's Bernie Sanders talking about baby onesies, which I guess I'm not a father, but clothes that babies wear that were sold by a foundation that Kennedy had been associated with. Take a listen.
They are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unfaxed, Unafraid. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with
leadership. Are you
leadership.
supportive of these onesies?
Doesn't there need to be an understanding of how angry a large part of America is, and maybe even a humility by science, at where we've gotten in some ways listening to science?
Well, let me put it this way. The way I see it is I understand that part of America is unhappy with how they've been treated, for sure. That's no different in a Republican or a Democratic administration.
Yeah.
Particular opinions that I've been asked to bring forth are neither Republican or Democrat, because as Surgeon General of the United States, I was responsible for the health, safety, and security of the United States. And often what I had to do was to tell truths to politicians on both sides of the aisle. And that's the challenge. Each side has a political agenda to move forward on. I look at the best science and I rendered the best opinions I could to those who gave me the authority to be Surgeon General so that they could make the best decisions, especially on complex issues. So the lens I look at right now through Mr. Kennedy is, does he have the core competencies to be able to do the job? No question he has the passion. No question he wants to change America. He wants to do great things. But again, if he's applying for a job in the private sector with the credentials he has for a company of that size, they wouldn't even look at the resume.
It's hard to argue with that. Unless he started it, he wouldn't be running it. Doctor, Thank you very much. We appreciate the time, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. President Trump is pledging to fill 30,000 beds in Guantanamo Bay with foreign criminals and felons. Well, Democrats now insist they stay in America.
And you see what we're doing? We're getting them the hell out of here.
Live look at the White House. Earlier today, President Trump dropped his latest bomb on immigration. Says he's going to be sending tens of thousands of illegal aliens to Guantanamo Bay.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them.
Trump made the announcement before signing the Laken-Riley Act into law. The legislation requires the Department of Homeland Security to detain illegal immigrants accused of certain crimes, including theft-related offenses, assaulting law enforcement officers, or crimes resulting in death or serious injury. With us now, Congressman Glenn Ivey of Maryland, member of the House Homeland Security Committee, voted against the Laken-Riley Act. And I think I'm going to go out on a limb here, but not too far, by saying I'm guessing you are against sending the worst of the worst to Guantanamo Bay. Why?
Well, I'm not sure what the theater of that would be, but the way it has worked now, so when you have an illegal immigrant commit a violent offense, they're prosecuted, go to jail, and after they finish their jail term, they're deported back to where they came from. So the Guantanamo piece, I'm not sure what his plan is for that or why he thinks he needs it, but there's a lot of things that they're proposing right now where they haven't finished out the details. I guess that might be one of them.
Why does it matter, the details? If there's people who've committed violent crimes that their country won't take back, why not send them to Gitmo?
I thought what he had said was that, the countries were taking them back. Now, if the incident with Colombia the other day, I think, ended up Colombia saying they would take them back. Of course, they already had an agreement to take them back anyway. But again, I'm not sure if Guantanamo's needed because I thought what he was saying was he was going to send them back to where they came from.
Okay, so you said something interesting, which is that if people are convicted of a crime, they are then deported. Yet there is a lot of sanctuary cities, and we're learning this is happening all over the country right now. Boston, ICE in Boston arrested an illegal MS-13 gang member charged with firearms and drug crimes. There had been an ICE detainer on him. He was ordered released, and then ICE had to go out and find him once again in the community. So the talking point from Democrats that, if you're a violent felon, you're automatically gone. It may have a semblance in the truth, but in practicality, there's a lot of democratic cities that don't enforce that. Does that need to change?
Well, I think the way that it works is, at least in the jurisdictions I'm familiar with, if an individual is arrested and he's committed a violent felony and he's been released for that violent felony, well, first of all, the judge would have the option to hold him without bond until the trial takes place. And if he's convicted, then they send him to jail, he serves out his term, and then he's deported. So there would be no point where he would be released. If there's a judge
Congressman, we can all agree there's sanctuary cities where there are people who are here illegally, who are arrested for crimes, often violent crimes, and they are released and not deported.
Yeah, I don't think that they should be, typically. So if a judge releases someone who's accused of a violent crime, that's kind of on that judge, because normally you would hold someone who's a threat or a danger to the public.
So if this isn't a problem, why is there Lincoln Riley Act?
Let me finish real quick. If they're found to be a threat or a danger to the public, under every state law I'm familiar with, and certainly the federal law, the judge has the right to hold them. And in fact, in some circumstances, they're required to hold them until trial. So I know we had some scenarios where people are out. Like we just had one over the weekend. A guy was detained for a DUI. That's not what we're talking about, I don't think.
I'm just confused. I'm just confused, though. If this is,
they were talking about murderers, rapists, and drug dealers and narcotics dealers. Those guys should be held.
Well, Congressman, I got so much respect for you. So why would you vote against the Lincoln Riley Act then?
The Lincoln Riley Act didn't actually impact any of that. Lincoln Riley expanded the requirement to deport for shoplifting, for example. In fact, shoplifting is explicitly one of the offenses that's now required for deportation.
And that's a bad thing?
Even if you don't have a conviction. So you could have a scenario where somebody's arrested for shoplifting, the cops drop the charges or a court throws it out, and they're still facing mandatory deportation under Lincoln Riley. I don't think that makes any sense. And the bigger piece, though, is it tried to create standing for states to sue and enforce international law, in this instance, immigration law, even though the province of the United States president has been the one that covers international and law and immigration. Yeah. Because it makes sense to have
So, Congressman, I just want to know what we're talking about. This is Jose Habana. This is the man who killed Lincoln Riley. He had been arrested for shoplifting. You say it doesn't make sense, but again, if there's an opportunity to deport someone who is here illegally, who has committed a crime by crossing the border, I'm trying to figure out if Democrats are not on the wrong side, forget public opinion, but of common sense of logic, that people who come here illegally, that have already committed a crime, then arrested for another crime, shouldn't we get everybody out who's committed crimes or allegedly committed crimes? I'm confused.
Well, the way the courts have judged it, in fact, Justice Kavanaugh, his approach was that, you can't hold everybody, and we don't have enough beds to do that. So the way the courts have handled it, and the executives and prosecutors, is you focus on the most violent offenders and use your resources for that. So what you're seeing this week, for example, is they're going in and making a lot of arrests. But many of the people, in fact, at least half of the people they've arrested so far haven't committed any crime whatsoever other than being here. So I guess you can deport them if you want, but I think most people would, let's focus on the murderers and the rapists first, get those guys out. Then if you got time for the shoplifters, you can go for them too. But right now, we've got challenges with violent criminals in the United States. Some are immigrants, some aren't. Let's focus on those guys. Let's get them in front of the courts. Let's get them prosecuted. If they're here illegally, deport them after they serve their sentence.
All right. Amen to that in terms of getting people arrested off the street. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you, as always. It's good to see you.
My pleasure. Good to see you, too.
Yes, sir, as always. First wrote about the mass deportations in War Notes. That's our daily newsletter. In your inbox at 4:05 p.m. Eastern. You can subscribe for free. warnotes.com. Email us with your thoughts or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Leland Vittert. Read all the comments. Will writes on Twitter, how the hell is you fair and balanced and you keep cutting the lady off and attacking her you are a bootleg Sean Hannity. So, hi, Will. Fair and balanced is what Fox used to say. They don't bother with that even anymore, or the appearance of it. Here's the difference between Hannity and me, and I know Sean well. We're going to compete against him at 9 p.m. in a few weeks. We have people on the show every night who disagree, and nobody, left, right, or center, gets away with talking points on this show. That's what makes us different. Danny writes on Twitter, I love @NewsNation as my go-to channel to watch national news, but no one can make me change the channel faster than Leland Vittert. For a network trying to build a reputation on balance, he sure is biased on everything he reports. So, Danny, you left one thing out in that. And look, Cuomo's coming up in 21 minutes, so there you go. But you left out who I am biased for or against. And I say this because nobody on Twitter can agree. If I'm biased for Trump, against Trump, let us know what you think. Francisco writes to War Notes, the newsletter has a lot of information and a lot of reading, but it could be written differently and without emojis. There is a lack of opinion on the issues. Francisco, this is the first time in my life that I have ever been accused of not having an opinion. And I appreciate that. We deal in facts. But you can pry the emojis from my cold, dead hands. David writes to War Notes, I am not a fan of On Balance being at 9 p.m. Eastern. I love the 7 p.m. slot. I'm 74 years old. And by 9 p.m., I am looking at my bedtime. On Balance and Leland Vittert are my all-time favorite news programs. And over my lifetime, I have heard and seen a lot. David, thank you. We do move to 9 p.m. on February 10th. That's 6 p.m. if you're on the West Coast. Set your DVRs. You can watch us in the morning. The new push by Democrats to stop Trump from making federal workers actually go to work when we come back.
We think a very substantial number of people will not show up to work, and therefore our government will get smaller and more efficient, and that's what we've been looking to do. Job sites and not from their home. As federal employees, they must meet a high standard. They're representing our government. They're representing our country.
It's President Trump talking about his administration's decision to offer buyouts to federal workers. The memo sent to thousands of employees is titled Fork in the Road. The memo lists 4 pillars for reforming the federal workforce: a return to office, a high-performance environment, a downsized workforce, and a high standard of trust, loyalty, and reliability. Employees have until February 6th to make and take an 8-month buyout program. After that, they will unquestionably be forced to return to the office. So it makes sense. We all go to work to earn the money to pay federal workers, but evidently, for many of them, going to work, as you will see, is too much to ask. Rob Shriver strongly opposes the president's latest actions. He's former acting director of the Office of Personnel Management under President Biden, now a senior advisor for Democracy Forward. Welcome. Why am I wrong?
So, Leland, first of all, I think we can all agree that federal workers owe an honest day's work, hard work to the American people.
Yeah.
I think, though, we should have a fact-based discussion here, okay? So let's start with the fact that 54% of federal workers show up in the workplace every day.
So that means 46% does not.
46% show up in the workplace on average 60% of their time. So 3 out of every 5 days.
I don't know. That sounds pretty good to me. NPR talked to a federal worker, one of these people who have this hybrid deal. They go in 2 days of work and we're not happy about going in a third. Take a listen.
I wake up at 4:10 in the morning and I get to work bright and early between about 6 and 6:15. I'm so exhausted at the end of the day. By that third morning, when I'm, waking up and teleworking, I am just so brain dead. It's actually hard to focus that next day. I cannot imagine trying to get in the car and go in a third day.
Nurses working 12-hour shifts, people on factory lines working 10, 12-hour shifts. Again, why should federal workers be afforded something that the people who pay their salaries are not often?
Well, we have nurses and factory-type workers in the federal government as well. I think it's important that working arrangements should depend on the function of the job and what's going to make the most sense to deliver for the American people. Now, certainly...
So why is offering people a buyout and saying, look, J.P. Morgan says, Jamie Dimon, a lot of the big banks have now saying this whole thing that people are more efficient at home is a bunch of hocus pocus. You get the best results when people are in the office. Why is offering people buyouts and saying, if you don't want to work in the office, good luck. Why is that bad?
Well, because it's not a buyout. There are rules there where agencies can offer federal employees early retirement or separation incentive payments. Why are they doing this out of the blue, different approach? Well, I know why they're doing it, because it's exactly what Elon Musk did at Twitter. And, he was sued for not honoring those agreements that he made with those employees.
That's Elon Musk at Twitter. I don't know about that, but I do know. I'm just trying to figure out if in 1995, Bill Clinton offered out buyouts. I'm sure you know about this program to a lot of federal employees. Looking back, I can safely say that our buyout program has been a huge success. It achieved what we had hoped to help us cut the workforce in a fiscally responsible and humane way. So when Clinton did it, and yes, it was backed by Congress, whether or not it's backed by Congress or not, why is Donald Trump doing the same thing bad?
Because he's not following the rules for offering a buyout, and people are skeptical.
Maybe the rules are stupid.
Well, people are skeptical because the email that federal employees got looks very much like the email that Twitter employees were sent. Because Elon Musk didn't live up to that deal now.
So if Trump lives up to the deal, is it okay?
Why are federal employees supposed to assume that Trump's going to live up to the deal when there's a track record of him not living up to deals and of Elon Musk not living up to a deal that looked just like this at Twitter? Okay,
I just want to put a button on this, though. But do you have a problem if they do live up to the deals, which I guess there'd be a lot of lawsuits if he didn't? Why would that be a problem?
I think that they should follow the normal procedures that are set forth, that Congress enacted in law to offer federal employees these incentives, because those are deals that federal employees can count on. This made-up Twitter-like deal is not something that federal employees have confidence in that it's going to actually come through.
Interesting. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Rob Shriver. They got a shout-out in today's hearings. So why do the Maha Moms, that's a group, really believe Robert F. Kennedy can make America healthy again?
His movement, led largely by Maha Moms from every state, you can see many of them behind us today, and in the hallways and in the lobbies, is one of the most transcendent and powerful movements I've ever seen.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gave a shout out to the Maha Moms, that is, Make America Healthy Again mothers. Here's how the New York Times described them: how the right claimed crunchy. Once eating whole foods and avoiding toxins was associated with a lefty worldview. Now being a crunchy mom is more often about health freedom. As Kennedy evolved, so did Crunchy into a horseshoe alliance of far left and far right leaning homeschoolers, homesteaders, hippies, and religious believers suspicious of conventional medicine who like to grow their own food. The New York Times was dripping with disgust, disregard for the movement. We do not have such feelings. With us now, two Maha Moms, co-founder Moms of Liberty and Mom of Five, Tina Deskovich, stay-at-home mom of three, content creator Jessica Brownsberger. Ladies, good to see both of you. I guess, Tina, start with you. Is Robert F. Kennedy really the right messenger for this, or do you just like the message enough that anybody will do?
He is the right messenger for this. You know, moms for decades now have been looking for an advocate to stand with them as they are defending and protecting their children. And what we saw during COVID is there weren't many people that were willing to stand with a national voice with moms that were very concerned about the things that were happening to children. But Robert Kennedy Jr. did that. And so he started, gaining more and more of a following of moms of all types of moms, no matter your religion, your color, your race, your anything. Moms with children that they were concerned about their children were getting behind RFK Jr. then.
Now, look, the New York Times is dripping with disdain. I don't feel that way, certainly towards you all or moms who have this sort of deep skepticism, Jessica. But at the same time, there's a lot of Robert F. Kennedy's views that crazy was a couple of exits ago. And I'm just curious as to why people are so focused on him when you could have the same kind of freedom, the same tear down the American healthcare system and the sort of orthodoxy to big pharma without all the baggage.
Yeah, I think just his stance on all of it is just the perfect opportunity for someone to be fighting and prioritizing the health of our children. And, future generations over the profits of big pharma and big food corporations.
Okay, so if we go back to this, Tina, what happened first? You get behind RFK Jr. or RFK Jr. get behind Donald Trump?
Oh my goodness, as I just said, RFK Jr., he was a voice of reason when moms were looking for someone to stand with them. I don't know if you understand how hard it was in America in 2020 and 2021, especially for moms that had special needs children or vulnerable children. Nobody cared about them. The schools did not care about them. They were leaving them home to learn on computers when they already had, a variety of special needs. They were taking deaf children, Down syndrome children, putting masks across their face. They couldn't communicate. Moms were panicked, and rightly so. And there was nobody, or hardly anybody that would stand with us. They called us crazy. They called us all kinds of names. RFK Jr.
Well, they said you didn't love your kids, right? I mean, and you remember people who fight for you when the chips are down. Jessica, I'll end this conversation with you. If he doesn't get confirmed, what do you guys do?
I fully believe that all of this starts at home. So if he doesn't get confirmed, all of us moms are still going to be pushing for transparency with vaccines, for transparency with what's in our food supplies and our food systems. And we can start making those little changes at home without somebody in politics or somebody in the government banning it first.
Tina, is it about bans? We talk about freedom. Do you want bans or just transparency? You get the last 15, 20 seconds.
Thank you. Transparency and accountability are number one. The federal government does not have to ban anything, but they do play a role here. And I do believe RFK will be confirmed. I do think he is the man for the time right now. But moms will continue to carry on to fight for their children at all levels of government till the end of time.